Excellent. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Energy and Environment Board. I'm Councillor John Cotton. I'm the chair of this board. I think it might just be helpful if I just do a quick round table of introduction so everybody knows, and actually so I know who everybody is, and rather than try and call you in. So I'll start.
I'm Councillor Rob Clinton, Dudley Council, Cabinet Member for Climate Change.
I'm Kate Ashworth. I'm Energy Infrastructure Lead for Energy Capital.
George Sims, Smart Home Lead, Energy Capital.
Ayushi Vyas, Net Zero Neighbourhood Delivery, Energy Capital.
Okay. I'm Sandy Makovich, Solihull, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Planning.
I'm Tony Thapper. I'm from the Environment team here, looking after the Community Environment Fund.
I'm Elspeth Sage. I'm also from the Environment team at the WMCA, and I'm the Local Nature Recovery Strategy Coordinator.
Mike Webb from the Environment team at the WMCA, working on the Natural Capital Programme.
Craig Evans, Governance Services Officer from the West Midlands Combined Authority.
And Jackie Homan, Head of Environment at the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Great. We've also got some colleagues who've joined us online as well. I'll just pull them up to introduce themselves. Peter.
Councillor Peter Hughes. I'm Cabinet Member for Regeneration and West Midlands Combined Authority.
Tristan.
Hi, Tristan Semple, the Link Programme Manager in the Environment team.
And then we've got some. Yeah. Craig.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Councillor Craig Collingswood from City of Wolverhampton Council, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Majid.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. It's Councillor Majid Mahmood, Birmingham City Council, Cabinet Member for Environment.
And then I think
George, so it's only Akil who is.
it's only Akil, is it? Yeah. Akil.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So it's Akil Rizvi. I work for the Combined Authority as the finance business partner supporting this portfolio.
Brilliant. Thank you all for that. So first item is apologies for absence. We've got any apologies?
Yep, so we've got 3 apologies received from Councillor O'Boyle at Coventry, Matthew Rhodes, Energy Capital, and Suzanne Ward, Environment Agency.
Okay, so we'll note those. If there's no other apologies, item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any interest to declare on any matters on the agenda today? No. Okay. Item 3 is chair's remarks, and we're relieved to know that there are none. So I'll move us on then to the minutes of the meeting on the 26th of September, which Majid kindly chaired in my absence. So I'll just have agreement from those who are present that these are an accurate record of the meeting. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you.
There's a hand there.
Pete, did you want to come in on a point, or we just signify
Yes, I do. They're incorrect. They don't show me as in attendance by Teams. If you have a look a bit further down in the minutes, I'm actually referenced as saying things. So I've got been there.
I think we can amend them to reflect that fact, because clearly we're making a contribution in the meeting. Okay, we'll get with that amendment. We're happy to agree those minutes. Right, so that takes us on to our first substantive item of business, which is the local investment in natural capital programme. Kristen.
Take myself off mute. Great, thanks everyone. I've got a slide pack to run through. I'm just checking, is 20 minutes? Can everyone bear that of PowerPoints?
We'll let you know about 15 minutes in.
Yeah, when the room's empty. And then just some room for questions. So I'll run through as an intro just to give everyone some background. Right, let's share. Just waiting for that to start as a slideshow. Hopefully that's come up.
Yeah, we can see it in the room.
Great. Okay, I'll move on. So, starting with the context, the drivers for the programme, we've got the environment plan and more recently the green finance strategy from government. And there's some pretty ambitious targets to achieve a major funding gap by bringing in the private sector to achieve those environmental ambitions that are laid out. Well, targets more than ambitions. The funding gap's estimated at the moment that there's a need to increase that private sector contribution up to £1 billion extra per year from 2030 and a phased increase from now till then. So to achieve that, the LINK programme is one of very many elements of the green finance strategy. We've got a pretty robust, I'd say, economic account of the importance of natural capital assets and ecosystem services now at a national scale. There's some big headline figures there. Health benefits from natural capital worth 600 billion. Air pollution removal and urban cooling and asset value increase in house prices from blue-green space and infrastructure. And then for Natural England, quite a bit of evidence about the well-being, health, social prescribing side of benefits from access to green and blue space, with a calculation that every £1 spent on a park in England creates an estimated £7 in additional value. Bringing private sector finance in is coming in the form of nature markets. The four in the boxes up above are those that are nascent or established, and are the ones that most investors and private sector are looking at the moment. Biodiversity net gain obviously coming in January, and that's the only mandatory market here, so it's framed slightly differently. There's a much stronger driver for that. The concessionary or voluntary markets of Woodland Carbon Code, peat Carbon Code for net zero targets are one of a range of tools for businesses and organisations to demonstrate their shift to achieve those targets. And nutrient neutrality is another market that's coming in areas with diffuse water pollution plans. We have, however, a recognition that nature does an awful lot more than those four things, and they are not going to be sufficient to achieve the nature positive, nature recovery targets. So other forms of market tools are emerging, and those circles on the bottom give an indication of some of the themes there: biodiversity, climate impact and adaptation, particularly flooding, but urban cooling as well, health and well-being, cost savings, reduction in insurance, and building resilience through nature-based solutions, taking pressure off grey infrastructure, and then the economic uplift, place-based value of nature and natural capital. At the moment, it's quite a complex landscape, nature markets, policy and regulation are emerging and in development. Frameworks, rules, standards, accreditation, schemes, taxonomies are all being developed at the moment to help bring greater standardization and rules to build confidence that's still lacking slightly in the use of these markets by the private sector. That's the kind of top-down approach, and the trajectory there is 2027 for the British Standards Institute to finalise the nature investment standards. So we're quite a way off there. But there's another approach, which is the ground up approach, organic testing, trialing, and trying to build case studies, pilots that we can learn from. DEFRA have funded over 80 of those projects through the NERF scheme, and a lot of valuable learnings come out of there, and a lot of challenges have been identified as well. In recognition of that, DEFRA have now funded 4 programs to scale up those pilots from the ground up to explore a larger regional, more strategic approach that is still ground up, but more around the missing middle. Those 4 programs you can see on the map here. We stand out from the other 3 in being very urban, predominantly urban, densely populated, and with a major challenge in that we don't have a large land bank to run those markets at scale around carbon particularly, and tree planting at the kind of scale necessary to attract private sector investment, which the kind of minimum ticket price of 10 to 20 million for investment there. But we're one of these 4, and we have been put into the mix specifically to explore bringing green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, natural capital into that urban environment. So I don't think I need to labour this. We can see how the programme fits with the government's green finance ambitions, and the key challenges we're addressing are those that have been identified through the raft of 80 NERF projects. But that is really mainly around scale. So I'll move on. The programme objectives, the key objectives that we have to achieve by March 2025 are these 5 overarching objectives. The first is exploring and demonstrating the potential for investment in natural capital. So it's a very exploratory programme, it's an innovation programme, and that is also about supporting the local authorities as placemakers and their role in engaging with the private sector to pull in extra finance through blended finance. Our other key objective is building capability and capacity across organisations, local leaders, strategic partners, and to build a pipeline of regional projects so that we can get the scale and aggregate across different projects across the region. The other is to develop local markets that are place-based and deliver outcomes that are of value to SMEs and private sector actors in the region. We are aiming and on track to be in a state of readiness to access that private investment by January 2025, and complete the programme with a body of learning to share by March 2025. And there's obviously a range of wider benefits that we can see from this programme that are outlined below. DEFRA have given us a rather complex and involved logic chain, a theory of change map, which we've built the programme out from. I won't go into that. That takes quite some digesting, but that's what we're working to. And that is with a longer term. So the programme runs to 2025, but 2030 is where we're looking to see the long-term impacts starting to materialise from the programme. In terms of where, why, and what we're aiming to do, that there's quite a bit of evidence that we're building into the programme to drive where those interventions are and where investment should come. One of these is that Natural England's Monitor of Engagement with the Natural World, which is a 10-year study, has the West Midlands at the bottom of the league in terms of access to green space for communities that are ranking low on the indices of multiple deprivation. So there's a key driver to change there. We've got climate vulnerability mapping for a range of factors, flood, heat, and again, that overlays, as you'd expect, quite well with areas of high deprivation, as does access to green space standards. Another key element that will be driving where investment goes is the local nature recovery strategy for West Midlands, which will focus on the natural capital and nature recovery elements across the region and provide a strategic spatial assessment of where those opportunities are. And another key case study is the Manchester Environment Fund and their Ignition project. And the studies that they've carried out have found that nature-based solutions in an urban environment can provide 30% of the adaptation needed to protect towns and cities by 2030 from climate change. It's a huge area, loads of projects. We're in the process of building a long list and starting to map out all of those and work with those delivery partners to find the opportunities to build the project pipeline. We'll work with testing a range of emerging models, one of which is the LENS Landscape Enterprise Network, which is building networks that are place-based value chains, focusing on the ecosystem service, aggregating that at the demand side, the buyer side for those outcomes as well, where that private investment will come in around the value chain. Pulling it all together, we'll be looking, this is a simplified sort of document, really a picture of what a regional platform would do in its simplest form. In essence, we're looking to establish a finance vehicle that will manage the transactions between all of the key stakeholders, the landowners, asset owners, buyers, investors, project delivery organisations and the local authorities, and build a regional brand, a regional natural capital investment strategy, a regional project pipeline, and the legal governance and finance models around that. We will be testing through the programme different models and looking to analyse and then appraise which are the best to go forwards once we've explored the opportunities and the types of projects that we're going to take forwards. Last slide, I think, last but one, the main work packages up until May we should be appointing a consultancy package. So support will be coming in end of February, early March to carry out market research to understand the supply and demand side across the region, to build an investor advisory panel, take us to an options appraisal on the markets and the type of models we might use, build a draft investment in natural capital strategy, and then share that with the board in May, hopefully, to take those options and recommendations forwards then to start building from May onwards the system information architecture, the platform, the pipeline framework to aggregate, and the relationships as well with place-based buyers and investors and landowners. We'll also be looking to accelerate at least 2 pilot projects to deliver and run a kind of proof of concept on those, taking us through to December, the end of December 2024, when we should have the legal financial framework set down for the model moving forwards. That then to be reviewed by WMCA board and local authorities to then take that forward with a business case and growth plan for the next 5 years. We have a pretty broad governance structure set up, and our programme steering group, which is quite large, involves all the local authorities and other key delivery or strategic partners in the region. We had a workshop last week with all of these, and I think, just to sum it up, the key finding and outcome from that was a consensus that there were far more opportunities and added value in working collaboratively to explore a regional approach to investment in natural capital, rather than each organisation trying to go it their own way. And that was the big take home from that. And out of that, our key opportunities in scope at the moment are biodiversity net gain and habitat banks, green and blue infrastructure and collaboration across different organisations in that space, nature recovery, habitats and species, improving access to green blue space, and nature-based solutions for climate adaptation and resilience. So we'll be bringing together themed working groups around those to shape up the projects and the investment propositions. So that's it from me. I will stop sharing and take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. Are there any questions from the board?
You go first. Yeah, thanks. I don't know if this works or not.
I don't think the mics are working, but
Yeah.
I'm told that they can hear us fine.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm from Solihull. I hope you've talked to our teams. We're probably way ahead of where you are now, actually, in terms of this thing. Yeah, first of all, I think Solihull is the key to local infrastructure. We have in our borough over half the special scientific interest and the well. So I think it's a question of linking our core to Coventry and to Birmingham. We've been applying biodiversity net gain in planning already as a pilot, and we've designated 2 biodiversity banks in the Solihull borough. And so we've already got those in place if anyone wants to invest in those. It's very important that, you know, if we could acquire more space, I mean, we're planting quarter of a million trees by 2030, and we plant 25,000 every year. We do a bit more land for that. We've acquired land just for keeping for some biodiversity, and we created a new park in Shirley as well for biodiversity, you know, Hope Coppice. So we're really in this, and we've got our strategy coming forward. But where we're most proud of is actually going into our urban parts of Solihull. One example is Kingshurst Brook, which is a culverted stream, and we used EDRF funding, and we've just deculverted it and actually let it meander, and we cut back some of the vegetation, the brambles and stuff, and then planted some wildflowers there. And within a few months, it's become like a mini park. And we went to visit. We had a family picnicking, and the stream is diverting and reducing flow downstream. Where that could be improved is in Birmingham, because that brook goes into Birmingham, where it's culverted in. And obviously that should be a priority for this, actually, is to continue that work into Birmingham and provide that whole holistic linkage. And I think we should try and do that. And also we should, you know, branding is important. We've got Horace the Hedgehog for our biodiversity branding. But we have, like, on housing estates, we have pockets of like ponds and stuff like that. We can clear those out, and a few bit of investment, get local kids involved in planting it. We can do that, and we can do that in all urban areas, actually. And in fact, we do need to, you know, for sheer biodiversity, is actually do a lot more in the urban space in terms of creating pocket parks and linkages. I mean, our biggest linkage to Birmingham is the Chiltern Railway line, or the Great Western Line. That provides the biggest corridor into Birmingham, and we need to make sure we feed off that corridor. You know, and I agree. I mean, my objective is that everyone's within 15 minutes of a wooded walk, because for mental health purposes, if you can just get out and be in a space, that's so important. So we can do that. Yeah. So hopefully you can confirm you're talking to Jenny Blakeman in Solihull and how we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Do you want to come back on some of those points, Tristan, and then I'll bring some others in?
Yeah. We are working with multidisciplinary teams across all the local authorities, as well as a range of other key delivery partners. So it is very much a case of trying to pull the opportunities together and then look for the linkages. So that's very much, I think, the benefit here is, you know, nature doesn't sit within political or other boundaries very well. It wants to work at scale. So that's I think where the opportunity is here, is to identify where those elements are, where good work is already going on, and then support and build from that, rather than starting things from scratch in places where there isn't already that energy and that momentum developed. So yeah, that all chimes very much with I think really what we're trying to look for, and that is identifying those key corridors as well. That's going to be fundamental to this, and that will also come out of the LNRS as well, identifying where those are.
Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to just speak out loud from what I've been thinking, right? Some of it might be okay, some of it might be totally off the wall. Can you correct me? So in the pack here, we're saying we've got £1 million fund, right? So is that £1 million fund divided between the four regions? And if so, no. So that's £1 million for West Midlands. Okay, so that's better, right? Because it wasn't quite clear whether it was divided or put in. Right, that's what I thought. We haven't got a lot of cash to play around with. Hey, we've got more cash now, right? When you did your presentation, you explained a lot a lot, right? So to me, it's sounding all very theoretically complicated, right? Rather than being focused on practical applications of what we actually want to try and achieve, right? So what I would like to know is, you know, you said you had conversations with various officers from each of the boroughs, etc., and you know that everybody's happy to work on a single focus, right? Wouldn't it be better for the public if each authority was allocated some funding and then said, these are your parameters, go and show us what you can do, right? So everybody can learn together. The local population, the local residents can then get involved hands-on with the schemes, yeah? And, you know, people can see spread out throughout the West Midlands, things being achieved, rather than like picking maybe one or two projects that we can focus on in one area or the other area of the borough. That's my only concern, is that there's a lot of time and effort and expertise going into a lot of paperwork, and although you may say, well, the paperwork's going to end up in practical application in 5 works down, why can't we flip it around a bit and have more practical implication and have some experiential learning from what we're doing together practically on the ground, so people can see things happening? Okay, I'll shut up now.
Okay, I can come back on that slightly, but I'm only in post doing what I've been asked to do, so I have to accept that. I didn't decide why the money got spent the way it got spent, or the framing of the programme. My understanding of that, though, the decision and the thinking behind that, is that government have funded lots of organisations, lots of projects to explore and test and do exactly what you said. And they are still continuing to do that, and there are lots of pots of money available for that. The gap, the key piece that came out from all of those pieces of work, is that none of them are at the scale to interest or attract or work with the private sector at the scale that's needed. So scaling up to a regional approach is entirely what this programme is set to test. That's its rationale as such, is to see if that scaling up helps add something that just funding projects and tangible outputs isn't managing to achieve. So that's my answer, I think, from the understanding I have of the programme.
So what you're saying then, this is a theoretical test base?
It will run with the concept of, from 2025 onwards, having built the relationships, the infrastructure, the models, and the legal and financial detail and transactional contracts, so that it can build from there and support a whole raft of regional projects. And those smaller projects can work because they can be aggregated into an investment proposition with similar projects. We will, however, be putting direct funding into some key priority projects within the next 16 months to run them as pilots as well. So we will be sort of accelerating some pilot projects as well with direct support and funding.
One last comment from me, and then I'll shut up, right, is when those projects are up and running, can we please have a boots on the ground visit to them? Yeah, so we can all learn from them, yeah?
Yeah, that's a great shout.
Right, I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Ed, did you want to come in on that point as well, before I bring others in?
I'm very happy for Councillor Hughes to go first because I think he had his hand up before
Yeah,
me.
it was just if it was a response to that particular point.
It is in some respects, yes.
Why don't we do that, and then we'll move on to Peter and to Majid.
So I think the point that I wanted to make is the link between this agenda item and the next agenda item, which is around our Net Zero Neighbourhoods programme as well. And I completely understand the desire of councillors to see activity on the ground, and you are all doing fantastic activity on the ground. As we go around the different local authorities, you can see the work, whether it's on biodiversity net gain in Solihull, or indeed the Net Zero Neighbourhood in Brockmore in Dudley. You know, these are really important actual live projects happening on the ground. The role of the combined authority, in my understanding, is to say, how do we scale those up in order to unlock investment in more of those local projects? Because what we know, both in terms of retrofit and in terms of biodiversity, is that little piecemeal grant projects here and there are not shifting the dial in the way in which they need to do that. So both of these projects, this local investment in natural capital and the Net Zero Neighbourhoods project, both of them are designed to try and find a financial model that will enable multiple projects to happen. And in this case that Tristan's describing, it's how do you get private finance into things that are not going to generate any obvious returns for those investors, except via certain mechanisms whereby they have to, primarily for ESG reasons, demonstrate that they are contributing something around sustainability. So can we create that regional model? Because I can tell you for a fact, it will be very difficult if each individual local authority tries to develop that model for itself. So that's what we're trying to do here. And I agree, it sounds like a hell of a lot of money to develop a model. But good that we've got that, because as Tristan says, we will have a couple of pilot projects where we can invest in tangible things on the ground in order to play out what that model might look like and then develop it and enhance it. So hopefully that, and it's exactly the same for the next project. We'll talk about a pipeline of net zero neighbourhoods where we're trying to do retrofit plus for those neighbourhoods in order to build out a financial model that will enable us to scale it in the future.
Can I say something else?
Very quickly, then I'll.
Okay, as another process for this, is there any chance then that we can have sort of like maybe a day conference on the findings and bring other experts in, right, from Fairfield, in from the local universities, right, to disseminate the information out into the higher educational facilities that Birmingham has as well. But I'd be very interested in attending a conference on the methodology that you've gone through, so other areas can learn from this.
Yeah, I'll answer that. Yeah, a big part of the programme is about knowledge exchange and generation, and with the aim of capacity and capability building across all organisations. So from January on, and we have done through the Link cohort, been involved in a lot of kind of knowledge exchange events to get our own understanding up, because this is a very new and emergent space and quite complex. A lot of different pieces happening at speed and changing rapidly. But certainly a key priority for us is to run a whole series of webinars focused on special parts of the nature market and green finance landscape as it's emerging, and invites will go out to all of the key stakeholders, partners, for people to attend as interest aligns with their job role. So yeah, that's definitely a key part of the programme, is education and knowledge exchange.
Yeah. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to maneuver my screen between different programs. So I think the first thing is, Tristan, can I ask who you've been dealing with at Samwell Council so far, please, just to, so I know who to speak to at our end relating to this.
You'll have to hang on a minute. My contact list at the moment is over 150 people, and I've only been in post a few months, so I can get that to you because we've had quite a lot of email traffic backwards and forwards and different people passing on to other people. I can give you a summary of everyone. That's.
We can pick that out. If you want to answer the next question, we can put it in the chat.
Yep. I think you've already answered the question about how and when you'll be building the capacity and capability of local leaders and partner organisations. You're talking about the workshops. I picked that up from the last question. I presume that's the way you're going to be doing it, is it?
Yeah, ongoing workshops focused around themes, and webinars where we'll be bringing in specialists from other areas and people who've tested and trialed and learned from doing as well.
The question I was going to ask, and it was picked up by our colleague from Solihull, was how that this whole thing is going to link in with the biodiversity net gain and the improvement strategies that we already have in place. I mean, like Solihull, we've identified, apart from the on-site opportunities during planning, we've identified 6 habitat improvement locations across the borough, but habitat banks where we'd like to improve the biodiversity on those areas. So I was just wondering how this all links in with that. Obviously, we'll be asking the developers to actually invest in those areas, and I'm trying to see where the link is here.
It's probably one of the, if not the top priority market to investigate, because it's the mandatory one. So it's the one that we've got powers to push, and the others are all voluntary and require a lot of building trust and testing. This we can roll with, so it's fundamental.
I'm just trying to.
I'm not sure if
I'm just trying to, if we've already identified where we want money to be spent when it can't be spent on site, and we've already identified those sites, and our local developers know that, and this is where we're going to end up spending the money. Where does the combined authority fit in with that, or this programme fit in with that? I'm finding a bit of a difficulty with the linkage there.
I don't have the answer to that yet. That's part of an exploration is around each local authority's position on that.
Right. Okay.
And that I don't have an answer, because it's about working with all the local authorities to identify what's going to support everyone achieving their objectives in the best way. And I can't have an answer. That has to come out of discussion and debate and options, and then assessing the benefits, the risks. There is a need for a third party in any of those for the verification in that transaction between being a habitat bank landowner who's going to benefit from selling the uplift in biodiversity. That transaction, the enforce section 106 on the developer, then holding that money, because there'll be most likely a time lag between the uplift being available, obviously, because we don't have 5 years worth of building these habitat banks ready and waiting with a load of buyers. So how that works across each local authority will be dependent upon development pressure, condition of current land, availability of land and space for habitat uplift. How it might work regionally is there's more flexibility then to share across. Obviously, we don't want to move things too far. that counters the kind of principle of keeping things as close to the the original loss of biodiversity. But in a regional approach, there's the potential that there's a reduction in the overall financial, legal, transactional management costs, rather than having 7 different vehicles working.
I understand, yeah.
And a reduction in risk as well then in doing that, from when issues are created, either if that's blockages, bottlenecks in being able to move that biodiversity unit into an available land bank.
Okay. I agree with a colleague from Dudley in relation to the theoretical nature and tone of this report, and I know it sounds critical, but if I own into a particular section 4.2, I mean these are for public consumption, not just us. When you talk about this will enable sellers of monetizable ecosystem services to develop a pipeline of investable projects in local areas to aggregate and direct finance flows to deliver environmental goals. You know, it sounds very sort of civil service type speak, and you know, we're normal people, us members, and navigating those words ourselves is difficult enough. Never mind the public, and I think we need to start speaking in plain English. And I know this is wrapped up in sort of some theoretical ideas. We've got to try and make it realistic for people as to what this actually means on the ground. Going to page 10, in relation to how portfolio members will be selected to go on the, I think it was the steering groups, was it? Or I'm just trying to maneuver my way down. Sorry, page 10. There's groups where you're selecting portfolio members, and I was just wondering, are you having all the portfolio members on there, or a selection of them? Trying to find the actual groups where you're suggesting this.
We haven't, beyond each organisation having representation in the steering group, those working groups around opportunities, key opportunities like BNG, the individuals that will come to those working groups are still being clarified who that is, because there's a span there over planning and ecology departments, but there's also potential integration with transport and infrastructure projects as well in some of the opportunities. So those will be one-to-one discussions with each local authority about whom they most see as fit to inform the development of projects that could fit into the pipeline that we'll test building investment propositions for and aggregation for. So that might be slightly different for each local authority depending on where they're at and what their focus and priorities currently are.
Who's likely to be on the regional board?
Sorry, what?
you have a regional board in the setup, I believe. I'm just asking who's likely to be on that.
The WMCA board is the overarching decision-making board for the programme.
I'm talking about the Environment and Energy Board. Are you talking about this?
That'll be this meeting, Peter.
Sorry?
That'll be this meeting.
It'll be this board, okay, right, no problem. Sorry, I'm being a little bit naive here. Who's on the Energy Capital Board? That I think what the problem I'm having here, because you're quite right. Some of these issues go across portfolios and services at our end, and it's difficult to establish who is doing what and who's connecting into what. And I think we've really got to try and get some clarification here. So can I ask the question, who is on the Energy Capital Board from Samwell?
Moving us on to the next paper on the agenda, isn't it, to an extent?
Just to address Councillor Hughes's direct question, we will supply a list to all of you as councillors as to which officers are representing you at there are about 5 or 6 different working groups in relation to all the different energy and environment programmes. And I think the simple thing to say is that we'll share a list of representatives at all of those meetings, including those that pertain to the 2 items we're talking about right now. Just to say though that up till now, the group that I chair around energy and environment, the Samwell representative is Tony McGovern, but I know that he's moving on now, so we'll need a replacement for Tony.
It'd be certainly helpful to have that detail shared around. I'm also just a little bit conscious of time as well, and we've got 3 other items to go through, and councillor members to speak as well. So
can I just pick up on one last thing?
Sure.
One of the ideas of the government in this is to address the unequal distribution of environmental benefits across different parts of the country. Now, if you go back to the climate vulnerability map, I'd like to point out, can you do that? I think I want to point out that there's a really bad unequal distribution of environmental benefits across the combined authority, and you'll find that we are the only borough without any green colour in that particular vulnerability map. And what I would ask, whereas Solihull and I was very interested in what the member from Solihull was saying in relation to some of the things there, but Solihull is almost entirely green, and this is where the differential is, and I want to know how the combined authority through this programme is going to address that unequal distribution. Are we going to see investment moving from one area to another, or are we going to be very sort of parochial in addressing these issues? Because in terms of vulnerability, Samwell, of the 7 organisations in the Met, is the most vulnerable. We have very little green land, a green belt to speak of, very little. In terms of urban land, brownfield land, we have very little identified for both housing and employment. We're actually going to be developing a former golf course, and as part of the proposals there, about 70% to 80% of the site will remain as green field effectively, and we want to develop a new park there, a biodiversity park. And what I'm going to ask is, because of the financial issues in relation to development in the Black Country, will we be able to be assisted with the development of the borough's first park in over 100 years to improve biodiversity through this arrangement, because we'd like to think that you know, that's where we'd get help with this. I'm sorry I've dominated, but look back at that map and you'll see what I'm talking about, and I think we need to do something about it. Sorry, John. I'm just stating our case.
I think we've heard that loud and clear, Peter. Tristan.
So yeah, in the interest of time, I apologise for a very quick response to that. I think in terms of where investment goes, we can't force that. Investors will invest. It's an open and a free market. We cannot force that. What we can do is create a very strong narrative and an evidence base that shows why and where that investment is going to have the most impact, and we can support in building the measures around that impact, as well as the story and the evidence that helps drive it. So the intention behind Link is that there is a regional strategy behind nature recovery that links in with other key drivers like deprivation, access, climate vulnerability, and that we layer all that up, and that helps us prioritize where we are pushing our effort and where we're hoping to get investment. But I don't think we can say that's where investment is going to go, because we don't have that power. That's left to the investor and the buyer, but it will certainly drive the programme.
Well, my comment there, and it will be the last one, unless the object, as I say, is to deal with the unequal distribution, unless this particular project actually tries to address that, then I don't see what the role of the combined authority is in this process, unless it's to give extra money to us so that we can achieve it. Because at the moment we would be trying to achieve that ourselves. You know, so this has got to be proven to me and to us back at Samwell as to what the object of this particular project is, if it's to achieve the government's objectives. Okay, thank you.
Right, did you have something on that?
Yeah, I think Peter, some really good points there, and I know exactly where you're coming from. I think just to add to what Tristan has said, this is the government's response to a lot of place-based projects, and they know that it's really challenging to get individual sites and projects funded and financed through private finance, and this is about aggregation. And through that aggregation, we can also develop the themes for investors. And for us, we're in the urban space, and accessible nature, climate adaptation, the things that you're highlighting are really up there. And what we are doing is forging relationships with Natural England's leaders in this space. So what DEFRA in essence have done is they picked the West Midlands as a really challenging area because they want to address this, and we are being encouraged to really use initiative to try and address those urban issues, those real challenges. So it's going beyond the easy wins of the open countryside, the peatlands, the tree planting. So it is really all about addressing a lot of that stuff that you've been asking about there. So yeah, that's really up on our agenda, Peter.
Right, I'm going to take a comment from Majid, and then I just want to try and move us on a bit, if I may. So, Majid.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, there's some references made to the Urban Accelerator programme, which is our programme in Birmingham to increase tree coverage and more importantly, tree canopy to get to 25% of the city. Also, Future Park Accelerator, where we're scaling up some of our parks in the more deprived areas. But we also have the City of Nature Board, and I think that would be most interesting to the combined authority, because that comprises of city council officers from Parks, Public Health, Birmingham Open Spaces Forum, which manages our 114 Friends of Park groups, the National Trust and Wildlife Trust, together with the Birmingham Tree Pin. I think it would be quite interesting to see how this all pans out with this project, because it would be similar. You could take some learning from the board and you can pan it out across the region. Also, housing land was really interesting. One of the members flagged up housing land. We've got lots of green spaces in the city, which is housing land, and we've always wanted to do some work with them, either plant trees or create wildlife meadows. But it's really difficult to get past the HRA regulations around investment on those types. And it would be really good if someone did some piece of work around that, see if we can accelerate the work on that. And on railway lines, I completely agree. There's so much work that does need to be done, but again, you have to go via Network Rail. So it would be good if we could bring in someone from Network Rail for some of. They must have someone who works along their brooks and along their railway lines, because that's one of my biggest problems in the city, trying to clear fly tipping on railway lines. And the final one is you reference 600 billion health benefits from natural capital. So is this our way of trying to encourage someone from the NHS also to get involved? Thank you.
Just before we come back on that, Tristan, because it's the season of goodwill, I will let Andy just have a second comment as well.
I reflected on the conversation, and we have a working model, or had a working model in Solihull called the Wildlife Ways Project, which answers all the questions that Sutton Well Dudley has. You know, it was £18.6 million, and that was a completely urban project that completely delivered small benefits in small sites, but provided great corridors that linked the railways, linked everything else up. But also, sneakily, because we weren't allowed, we've actually provided cycleways within that. So I think rather than reinvent the wheel here, come to Solihull, find out how the Wildlife Ways project was managed and replicate it for the rest of the West Midlands, because it worked. And we did answer all those questions that the member from Sandwell was worried about. Prove that. It's a working model, it's worked. Why reinvent it?
Okay, Tristan, can I just ask you to respond to those points?
Yeah, thank you. The Birmingham City of Nature Board will definitely engage with and try and make sure that we're aligned and that we're learning from what they're doing and engage with. So thank you for that. Network Rail and other key utility infrastructure organisations we have had early conversations with. They're all in very different space in terms of nature markets and investment, because they are both potentially a buyer and an investor. And there's a lot of different perceptions around natural capital, green, and whether it's a problem or a solution in terms of that hard engineering thinking. So we are in conversation around that. And NHS, that kind of social prescribing side of things, those reduction in pressure on the NHS via the benefits from access to nature, exercise, fresh air. That's very much a part of one of our key themes as well. So yeah, we'll definitely be exploring where the opportunities lie for outcome buying or investment via health services. So yeah, thanks. And yeah, any case studies where things have succeeded or failed and learned, those are highly valuable, and I welcome signposting to any of those. And I hope I will, via the more focused one-to-one workshops with your officers, find and identify and take the learning from anything.
It's not really, it's a working model that's delivered £18 million of investment. You ought to really come and talk to Jenny in Solihull and find out exactly how they did that, because there's a whole, it's in place. You don't need to reinvent it. And we spent 18 million in Solihull on urban regeneration of wildlife ways.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tristan and colleagues for that. The recommendations were to receive the update, which I think we can agree we received, and also to provide some input into the process. I think the comments that have been made around the table online certainly help with that. And I do think there is an important point here on drawing on experience that's already happening out in our respective authority areas and using that to help inform and shape this as well. Okay.
That's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If the board's happy to accept that report, let's move on then to the Net Zero Accelerator.
Thank you. I'm going to go first. So the board paper covers the backstory to the Net Zero Accelerator funding and how we started off applying for 4.8 million pounds funding from Innovate UK, and then ended up with 6.2 million pounds worth of funding, possibly more from the government. We'll have a presentation from Ayushi in a moment on what we'll be doing and why, but I wanted to provide a little bit of the wider context behind the programme. And to reinforce Ed's earlier point, really what this programme is about is channeling investment and funding into creating net zero places, and in doing so, creating much greater impact and potential for scale than individual grant schemes or piecemeal investments would do. It's also highly relevant to the work we're doing on devolution, on the single settlement, and energy system planning, as well as furthering the region's inclusive growth principles. The funding award validates our position that when you invest in net zero in the right way, by shaping funding and investment around the needs of communities and with their input, you're not only likely to address the energy challenges that we face in a more effective way, but address another a number of other needs, for example, around health and well-being, creation of employment opportunities, climate change adaptation, but potentially even positive impacts in terms of some quite esoteric things like crime reduction, educational achievement. There is evidence there that we can build on. And by coordinating all of this with infrastructure investment, funding for local transport improvements and green spaces, we can ensure that public funding is spent much more effectively. It's essential bridging funding to develop the pipeline of net zero neighbourhood projects that we have as a region and create the environment in which better coordination of investment, more successful engagement of funders and communities can happen, and we can create greater impact. And going further, I'd say it's also the key to making the pilot for devolved retrofit funding work and to cement the long-term future of this funding. There's a combination of a lot of successful innovation and development work that Energy Capital and our partners across the region have done in this area, and also engagement with government. Lots of hard work to do. It is very complex. It won't be easy, but I think the award of the funding is recognition of the fact that we're ahead of the curve in this area as a region. It's validation for the work that we're doing, but it's also a fantastic opportunity to set the pace nationally on this and become the example that others learn from and follow. It's a good chance to reflect on this, and what we're asking from you today is an endorsement of the decision to accept the funding from government. There's a programme business case being prepared, and that will be put forward to Investment Board in March. Before we go to questions, I'd like Ayushi to present on the programme and a little bit more detail on what we're actually going to be doing.
Yeah, thanks, George. So just a little recap. So a lot of, like Ed said, a lot of the kind of problem statement of this came from the Net Zero Neighbourhoods programme. And we have 5 really detailed plans from all of our kind of local authority partners on net zero neighbourhoods in their own areas. The idea of a net zero neighbourhood, like Ed said, it's retrofit plus. It's not just looking at energy efficiency in buildings. It's using the neighbourhood level engagement to understand what else people want to see from their spaces. So whether they want to have increased access to green and blue space, like Tristan was saying, or whether they need better mobility, better community resilience. So we're kind of using it as a bit of an excuse to understand on a wider basis what communities would like to see from a net zero future. So we've got 5 pretty good plans from all of our local authority partners, and when I first joined, it was the question of hustling to get as much money as we could to get investment into those plans, because we've got enough money to start the Brockmore project, but we needed a bit more, about £2 million each, to start the rest. And we did quite a lot of kind of investor engagement through that hustling. And a lot of the feedback that we had was, yes, this is a great idea in practice, but we don't see any evidence that this approach is going to work or create any kind of revenue streams. But also we're not really quite ready to invest yet because it's, you know, you guys are not credible delivery partners really, and there isn't really a way for us to channel money into this program. So that's kind of where we got to. So there's a huge amount of interest. We were like, right, the funding is there, the finance is there. It's just how we access it and how we speak the right language. So we started looking at how else we could include, how else we could strengthen that funding stack. So, you know, kind of what Tristan was saying earlier on the funding gap. So even if you were to source some form of private sector investment, you'd still have quite a significant funding gap to try and do just even the retrofit portion of this approach. So we were like, right, there's an opportunity being lost here. We've got loads of great retrofit being delivered through other programs like Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund and HUG. But we're leaking value through those because we're not measuring things like improvements in health, improvements in well-being, improvements in air quality. And we think, and we thought, that there is value in measuring and financializing some of these to strengthen that. So that's kind of what outcomes-based financing is. So we said, right, we think that we can source a little bit more money from outcomes. We think we can source a little bit from central government through devolved funding, and a little bit through maybe the private sector. So that's kind of where the problem statement came from. It came from, okay, how are we going to fund things like net zero neighborhoods, but also how are we going to fund at scale retrofit generally, things like heat networks, things like smart local energy systems, which is like, you know, net zero neighborhood times 50,000. So that's kind of where it came from. So what are we going to do to try and make that happen? So now we've got the opportunity. What we would really like to do, and this, apologies, this might be a little bit small, but I will try and talk through. So this diagram is kind of split into three. So you've got the bit at the top, which we're calling the top down piece, the bit at the bottom, which is called the bottom up piece. And as Tristan's also alluded to, we've got that missing middle, which is that box in the middle. So what we're coming from a position of recognizing that at the very top, there's quite a few investors across the scale of looking for specific outcomes through down all the way to looking for just pure return. They are and can be interested in putting money into net zero projects. Like I said, there's loads of money in that space. It's just about how we access it and how we communicate with those people. And at the bottom, we've got loads of really exciting net zero projects in the pipeline. So we've obviously got our 5 net zero neighborhoods. We've got a ton of retrofit that's being delivered across the region. But we also have, through the local area energy planning process, the ability to create a pipeline for a lot more credible projects. So that's coming. We've got, you know, demand from the bottom. We've got demand from the top that we just need to match up. Now, what's missing is this piece in the middle, which is the infrastructure to be able to layer different types of capital in order for us to kind of send it out the door in one nice package so that people aren't being able to cherry pick the projects that just make them the most juicy returns. Because at the core of this is basically to transition to net zero as a region, it has to be a just transition. People have to benefit from net zero equitably. And if we allow the private sector to come in and pick the projects that they like the look of the best, that's not going to happen. So we have a responsibility, you know, as the CA, to try and avoid some of that by creating some of that kind of missing middle. So our kind of vision, our 2-minute pitch is essentially we are going to create a regional net zero funding entity at the end of our kind of 2-year funding period, which is March 2026. By the end of that, we'll have a structure set up, and we will aim to have at least one private sector investor, whether they're an outcomes-based investor or, you know, a pure return-seeking investor signed up to invest into the fund. And it's really good timing as well, because that's when our devolved funding will come through from central government. So that will also play a really big role in kind of helping us to leverage additional funding. So that's what we're looking to build, this regional net zero funding entity. So a huge amount of our work is going to be looking at kind of the governance structure of that, who needs to own it, how it needs to be contractually set up, term sheets, all that kind of good stuff. And then another big piece that goes into there is kind of the response in response to a lot of the feedback that we had from investors was the data just doesn't exist and it's too risky for us to actually go away and do some of the due diligence. So we're going to build some of that data and baselining, which is that kind of dotted line in the middle. So it's creating the kind of data architecture, the outcomes metrics, which are based on our inclusive growth principles, to show that we are creating additionality for every pound spent by investors. We're saying, okay, if you're spending £1 here, you're not just creating net zero benefits, you're also creating health and well-being benefits, you're also creating energy systems benefits, all that kind of stuff. There was one other thing that I was going to say on that middle piece, which is now escaped me. But yeah, so that's the kind of key, that's a really key part, is helping, again, de-risk some of that fund, which gives us credibility to investors. And a huge part of that is also monitoring and verifying and making sure that the outcomes that are being generated equitably, fairly, and are being generated. So that is the vision, the 2-minute pitch, the regional net zero funding entity. I've got another slide, just very briefly we'll cover, which is basically how we think we might do it. But the key thing that I want to, so this is just, I'm not going to go into any of the detail of the work streams, but the one that I wanted to highlight here is the work stream 1, which is net zero neighborhoods implementation. So a huge chunk of this money is going into actually delivering those 5 additional net zero neighborhoods, because we have a recognition that they kind of have the right level of different types of outcomes that we can start to prove and create a evidence base for through that. So a huge chunk of our kind of money from DESNZ is going into actual implementation. And that is also developing capacity and capability with our local authority partners within their teams as well.
Do you want to say where they are?
Oh, yes, I have a slide somewhere. Oh, no, I don't have, it's not in here. So they are in Wolverhampton, that's Graiseley, Sandwell, which is Park Lane Estate, Birmingham, which is Castle Vale, Solihull, which is Chelmsley Wood, which is based on the Chelmsley Wood 15-minute neighbourhood, and Walsall, which is Dudley Fields, and that one's really exciting because they're kind of tying it into the Block Switchtown Improvement Fund as well.
That's well in Brock.
Oh, as well as Brockmore, yeah. So at the same time, we've got Brockmore ticking along, which is slightly ahead of all of these, but we can benefit from having some of the learnings from that, which will allow us to kind of inform the way that the next cohort can develop their net zero neighborhoods. Did I miss anything? No?
Maybe just to say a massive thank you to all our local authority colleagues who have been absolutely core to developing and co-creating these plans, the detail of which we wouldn't be able to show that delivery route. So it's been a massive kind of combined effort, and great thanks to those colleagues who've worked on the programme to date. It's really exciting that we can then take it up to the next level.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. These neighbourhoods are great, but and I think I agree with everything. One thing I just wonder what your thoughts are on solar PV in those and how we utilise it, because at the moment the energy companies want to take a field near a big power cable and litter the field with PV cells, which is not a good use of land. The land should be, there's housing, there's agriculture, there's biodiversity competing in that. In urban areas, we have loads of roofs not utilised, and even in those neighbourhoods have roofs. And the problem is Western Power just won't take or distribute that power. Now in Solihull, thanks to the WCA, we've got the heat network. So we're going to have a private wire within Solihull to enable us to generate on our rooftops and then sell on that power. Now, in these 50 million neighbourhoods, has any thought been given, collaboration, Western Power and ourselves, to put a private wire in, put the power on the roofs, maybe with some battery storage, and then offer those residents cheap power to actually be able to sort of save fuel poverty, but also save the planet? Are we doing any thinking about private wire within those?
Absolutely. So all of our kind of local authority colleagues have slightly different views on this, but it's what we're calling collective self-consumption, which is basically when you put some solar PV up, pair it with a battery, and you don't even need to interact with the grid because you're just using energy a bit more efficiently behind the meter. Those models are definitely being considered, and like the neighborhood approach is key for this, because for any of those kinds of models to work, even heat networks, you need a huge amount of buy-in, and you need to build trust in the delivery partner of whatever that kind of situation is. So what we're starting with first is the trust building piece first, and then we can use that trust to test what people would see most value from. So whether they would be open to hosting solar PV on their roofs and having a battery in their garage and then sharing that power with their neighbor, for example, or would they just prefer to, link into a heat network? So that's definitely part of the kind of longer term plan. But we're kind of working from a place of you kind of need to build the trust with the community first to create that buy-in.
You could, for instance, have a 3 megawatt hour container full of batteries where you buy it off peak, where the grid is got surplus electricity, and then you bleed that to that community where they can have basically a 50, almost, should be some, at least a substantive reduction on their electricity bill, because you've been managing and you've been taking electricity from the PVs into a big community battery, which can be hidden by flowers and stuff like that. And then they can almost take them off grid, and that will make a tremendous effort for fuel poverty and also the climate, because you're then not having to run a gas power station somewhere in the UK at 5 p.m. because we're actually managing the load. I think there's government paper out on using car batteries for this, but in these 50 million neighborhoods, you could put a 3 megawatt hour battery in that's shared amongst all the residents and offering really substantial savings in fuel.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring Kate in here.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's a great suggestion, and absolutely recognises the key importance of some of those kind of the bigger scale energy infrastructure required. And I think absolutely one of the beauties of accepting the higher fund is the wider recognition of that infrastructure piece. So absolutely it will be considered, and we will be building that into our scope.
Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that with this new project, the former projects that were outlined in the previous funding, are they going to be included? Secondly, is there going to be any joint work with Manchester, something around back office operations and initial assessments that might be taken out, maybe prudent to hire the same companies? And finally, just on the fact that this does need to move in pace, you have mentioned the board decision in March. We really need to stick to that. Thank you.
Yeah, so just regarding the first part of the question, which was the previous projects, are you talking about the net zero neighborhood projects or the ones that were mentioned by Tristan?
Both. See what's actually in this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the vision is in the long term that all kind of lots of different types of net zero projects should be able to benefit from the structure of this fund. And we've spoken with Tristan quite at length about like how this design would work with the kind of natural capital fund design. And we're very keen to simplify the investor journey into kind of regional investment into the West Midlands. So we want to say, like, how can we create a single point of entry for investors into the West Midlands, whether they want to invest in natural capital, whether they want to invest in net zero, we can kind of unpick that for them. But if they come into kind of one place, and then behind the scenes, we can allocate that as best possible. So yeah, definitely all of the projects should benefit from the structure of this fund in the long term. That's part one. And then I think part two was about how we're working with Manchester. So I'm going to bring Kate in on that one.
Yeah, so absolutely. So yeah, just to add to that, this is essentially utilising the work that's been done today and adding to it. So we're not throwing anything out. We are building on what's been done previously. In terms of your point, Manchester, it's a really great suggestion. Absolutely, we've been working closely with colleagues in Manchester, trying to kind of learn, collective lessons and best practice. There will be a governance structure in terms of the monitoring of this programme directly, which involve a programme board, which they will be part of. So there will be, not only are we be doing that informally by working with officers, but there will be a formal route around governance to be able to do that as well. So we're linking closely in on both counts.
I think the last part was just sticking to the board decision in March. So yeah, we're feeling the heat on that as well.
Right, that's good. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, the officer mentioned earlier on the project in Wolverhampton, Graiseley. It was just a comment, really. I was just going to say that we as Wolverhampton Council are very pleased to be part of this exciting project and look forward to working closely with the combined authority in 2024 and beyond to try and make a real success of this project. And from the discussion that I've had with my officers, I know that they are very eager to push forward for the benefit of residents, all the stakeholders and the wider community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That was really validating. Yeah, we're working quite hard with the Wolverhampton team as well. So that's really, thank you very much.
Good. Local working in action. Rob.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what's just been said then relating to Dudley and Brockmore. Brockmore, personally, you know, because I'm relatively new to this role, only been doing it for 18 months or so, and I'm sort of like a person who wants to see quick actions, and it's been a slow process bringing on board contractors, working out the contracts. Right, that's a really painstaking procedure that they have to go through, and it slows the whole procedure down. And then it's also bringing on board the public and the private householders, those people living in local authority housing, and those people also living in private housing. So we don't leave anybody behind in what's moving forward to this. One thing that I would like to see more emphasis on, and this is purely built on my own personal experience of trying to get some solar panels and some battery storage for my own property, is I think we need to be working with stakeholders in local manufacturing, right? We need to be building these solar panels here. We need to be constructing, building these battery packs here. We need to be building and getting ready all the insulation panels here. You know, we used to be the world's leader in the industrial revolution. There's a new revolution coming on board now, and we're leaving it to China. Yeah, you know, the closest I could get solar panels, I think, was from Israel, and that's going to be problematic now, right? And you know, somewhere in Eastern Europe that was making them unlicensed from Israel. The rest was China. Now, I've got nothing against the Chinese; they got fantastic business models, but we really need to be emphasising the brownfield sites that we've got throughout the West Midlands, central distribution, and putting some real stringent effort into skills and growth building, jobs for young people, manufacturing jobs where, you know, they can learn a trade that's going to take them forward. I know I used to be affiliated to University College Birmingham, which is literally a spit down the road, and they've just started construction courses there, right? So I'm not sure what they're doing. I'd be interested to know whether they're focusing on these sort of activities for teaching people. But I really think that we would have a massive emphasis on encouraging the skill base, local skill base, West Midlands skill base, and manufacturing hubs, West Midlands hubs as well. Yeah, that's it.
Just to respond on the point around skills, yes, absolutely. So we need to think about how the adult education budget can be best used. On University College Birmingham, I visited the new facility that they were developing then about 18 months ago. And yes, part of that was having rigs that were doing external wall insulation, those sorts of things. So they are teaching those skills, not because it's necessarily the demand, but because they think it's the right thing to do. On other manufacturing, I'll ask Kate to come in.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. We do need a big emphasis on this, and we need to be in front of the curve on it, because you know the lead times on it. There, you'll be heartened to know as part of Plan for Growth that actually there is a smart energy cluster which has been identified as a sort of nascent cluster, but one that is to be supported through that plan. So we very much welcome your support and ideas of how we could look to take that forward. But suffice to say that there is resource and focus being spent in how do we attract those businesses, how do we ensure kind of local supply chains and that sort of thing.
It'd be nice to see that in the stakeholder analysis of
How do we build in that
Yeah,
economic growth
yeah.
through that programme? We'll take those comments on board. Thank you.
If I could just build on top of that, which is to say that the single settlement that we're negotiating with government at the moment across a whole range of regional priorities includes a big chunk for retrofit funding. What that will mean is we will receive as a region a significant sum over a 5-year period. That will give our manufacturing base, if you like, a degree of certainty that there will be a demand over a 5-year period. Part of the problem they've got at the moment is they see us receiving little drips and drabs of funding, and even this, frankly, comes in the category of little drips and drabs of funding, which means they're not going to invest in plant, they're not going to invest in skills, they're not going to invest in all the things they need to do to actually build out that supply chain. So hopefully the single settlement, which is only coming to the West Midlands, will also give us a kind of first mover advantage from that point of view.
Yeah. Building, that's something I personally lobbied government with as well, is that 5-year certainty to allow that building. But to actually, making your point, to actually grow the economy, we need a supply side reform. And that's the key. So we do need to encourage, divert money from as much, dare I say it should be the priority in spending. Government spending should be the creation of new industries, but that will then create the money to pay for the public sector. We mustn't be trapped by.
It's the problem we have is the concept of spend, isn't it? Everybody wants the cheapest, the best for the cheapest, and that comes from overseas, right? But what you guys have quite correctly said in the previous presentation, when it's measuring value and it's applying for these, we've got to look at the social and the cultural benefit, and that value that's got to be added in. So if we do spend a little bit extra cash, the benefit is the jobs are here and the taxes are paid here, right? So you've got to follow the revenue streams, haven't you? Yeah.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to echo Craig's comments in terms of the support that we've been given locally by combined authority officers in trying to navigate and deliver some of these retrofit projects. And I want to say thank you to those officers at the combined authority that have done that. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Peter. I think there's a wide recognition around the table of the work that's been done there, and it's very welcome indeed. Okay, if there's no further questions on this item, clearly a really important piece of work. I'm really welcome to see the money that we're securing to back this up. The point's been made around the timelines that we're working to, so I'm sure we'll be picking that up again at this board at future meetings, but thank you again. That moves us on then to, now Mike has indicated that in view of the time, he'd like to defer the local nature recovery strategy, because I think there'll be more to report on that at a future meeting. So I'm going to go straight to the item on the Community Environment Fund. Tony?
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to give you a very quick update on what's been happening with the Community Environment Fund. Jackie, can I click through here, or are you going to?
I'll click for you. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So very quickly, if you're not aware, the Community Environment Fund is part of the Commonwealth Games Legacy Enhancement Fund, part of that £70 million which came to the West Midlands. At the moment, you may be aware of the Inclusive Communities Fund, which is active, and there's 9 million available there. But we also launched 2 months ago the Community Environment Fund. I hope it's nothing I said. But to be clear, the Community Environment Fund is trying to support the other aspects of the overall Commonwealth Games legacy funding as well. So it is about people as it is about as much about nature. If we go on to the next slide, please. So we are looking at 5 themes in the Environment Fund. We are looking at the natural environment. We're looking at access to green and blue spaces. And as already been mentioned by members from Solihull, there is in the West Midlands a lot of grey that can be improved. So we want to improve that access for our residents. There's also just raising environmental awareness amongst residents in the West Midlands. And we've introduced 2 new themes this year because this fund builds on the success of the previous Green Grants Fund, which my colleague Mike was in charge of. The circular economy, that's a new theme that we're exploring this year. So that's about trying to avoid resources going to landfill sites. And it's proving to be really, quite interesting. There's a lot of organisations that have shown interest in the circular economy. And the other new thing that we're interested in is adaptation for climate change. How our neighbourhoods, how our communities going to get ready for the change that is coming for us all, and for some say it's here already. Okay, should we quickly go on to the next slide? So as I said, we only launched at the end of October, and since then we've been through a process of raising awareness, taking in inquiries, handling those initial inquiries, and just continuing to sell the fund. And if members are able to help us do that, we'd much appreciate it. But we'll just give you some stats now, just tell you how we've been getting on. So just in the first couple of months, we've had 57 inquiries. There's a 2-stage application process, which is managed with the Heart of England Community Foundation, good partners with us in this project. You'll see we've had the first stage is an expression of interest form, and the next stage is the full application form. So far we've had 22 expressions of interest, and you'll see how they spread themselves across the different local authorities in that slide. It's only led to 2 applications so far, but all I'd say is the pipeline of expressions of interest is building up at the moment. We're expecting more to come through in January, and hopefully the grant assessment panel is going to meet in January and February, and then every 2 months after that, and we can hopefully start releasing some funds and making some awards, and hopefully spend the most of the £1 million by this time next year. I mean, that's anticipation. We want funds have got to be spent, that is actually spent by the end of next year. We want to complete the project by March 2025, so have some results in and learning that we can share, and hopefully it would lead to the outcome, hopefully a more energised community sector that's more engaged with environmental projects, environmental activities, and raised environmental awareness. And it might feed into some of these other wide and more strategic projects that you've been talking about earlier. I think it's just the last slide. Just for members, if you need to get in touch with us, want to pass on our contact details to people in your authorities or community organisations, please do. We're happy to go out and visit projects and talk to potential applicants. That's not a problem. We've got some webinars lined up for January and through into February as well. I think the first one starts with Sandwell SCVO on the 9th of Jan, and we'll continue to promote the scheme as much as we can and help community groups take action.
Can you maybe email those links round and give us?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, sure.
Also be helpful, I think, for members to know when webinars are coming up in their areas, so we can share that amongst our own sort of community contacts.
And is there like a brochure, a PDF we can pass on to?
Yes, yeah, we can do that. We can put a little pack together for you so you can circulate.
I think that'd be really useful.
Yeah. Is the funding part funding or full funding?
It can be either.
Okay.
So you can have match funding if you want to, or you can just be. So we're seeking, our ambition was 5 large grants of up to £100,000 and about 30 smaller grants up to about £25,000. Majority of interest at the moment is the smaller grant range. So But we think, we've got some interest in the larger awards as well.
Majid?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just on this, I'm very supportive of the fund, and I've looked at the projects that have been awarded on the website. I just noticed that I couldn't really reflect any of them being community groups from the Black, Asian minority groups in the region or from socially deprived areas. So I do think there needs to be a push to try to raise awareness around the availability of the funding to those particular groups. Thank you.
Right, no, we're very conscious of the fact that we do need to reach all parts of the region, and we're trying our best to do that. But just for clarity, we haven't made any awards yet. You may have been looking at the previous Green Grant scheme, but this scheme hasn't made any awards as yet. But yes, you're right. We are conscious that we need all communities to be taking part in these activities.
And that's why I think the role of elected members and those community networks is so important.
Yeah.
So being able to share that information around so people are aware that it's there and can tap into it. Ed?
Yeah, I would just push back slightly, even on the previous Community Green Grants programme. A lot of it was targeted towards more deprived areas, and I think we can show that it did go to those more deprived areas. I think that we should take Councillor Mahmood's comments really seriously, though, about how we reach into racialised minority community organisations in relation to this fund. I think it is a national challenge. It's not just a regional challenge, but it is the case that it is very difficult to reach those communities in order to bring forward environmental projects. And so we're very conscious of that as a challenge. And I think we do need to think really hard about how we mobilise, our faith networks and so on, in order to be more effective in that space. But there is a kind of really kind of significant national problem, I think, it's fair to say, in relation to how we link Black and minority ethnic community organisations to environmental programmes like this.
I think it'd be useful to draw on any experience elsewhere that successfully done this, but certainly my experience of just my own part of the world is that there's no lack of interest or appetite from communities in this. So it's just about how we make those connections and it's accessible.
It's also maybe the paperwork and it's the fear of doing it. So maybe you need hand holding there. It might be too daunting or too much responsibility.
I think one of the key things is grabbing people's attention. And I would say if you can grab their attention by branding each one individual. So if we're talking the Commonwealth Fund, we didn't need people from all over the Commonwealth. We've got the Commonwealth here. We could have got participants. So if you can look at if you can look at like what sort of icon is held or revered by each community and build a project linking onto that, whether it's like an animal from different part of the world, I don't know, for argument, Indian tiger, so you can have a tiger project, right? You can have a lotus project, right? There are lots of different things that help create an attachment to a project for different cultures. And it's a simple thing like that could actually start the ball rolling.
Now, there are lots of different, I suppose, motivations for people getting involved in these projects. Just so you'll understand my own background, I've been involved in environmental issues for the past 30 years and often have been, a minority in a lot of environmental groups and meetings. So I understand where the journey is for a lot of groups. And the fact is that I'm able to go out and meet with them and have conversations with them and help them understand the application process. Try and make it less daunting for some. Inevitably, it's DCMS money eventually, and we've got to have some sort of record. But we are trying to break down the hurdles of just getting to the application stage. And having the two-stage application form helps us to go and have a conversation first, rather than just see it's all on computer and that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions on that, but clearly I think we'll all take an action point from this meeting to help spread the word around the fund. Right, I think that brings us therefore to conclusion for today. The date of the next meeting is the 7th of March. So I suppose it just remains for me to say, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
See you all in the new year. Thank you.